Senator Marco Rubio has released a new report detailing a, quote, mountain of circumstantial evidence that COVID-19 originated from a lab in Wuhan, China. Rubio's 300-plus page report alleges a serious biocontainment incident occurred at the Wuhan Institute of Virology in 2019, and that a, quote, careful reading of reports from the lab spanning more than a 3-year period yielded a picture of a struggling institution, underfunded, underregulated, and understaffed. Now, according to the Daily Mail, Rubio's report states that on September 19, 2019, the Wuhan lab shut down its online virus database overnight. 6 days later, the lab advised the Wuhan airport on a drill in case of the outbreak of a novel coronavirus. Then just days after that, a Wuhan resident known as Su died from what a Chinese biostatistician believes is COVID-19. This death, thought to be China's first from COVID, occurred in September 2019, 2 months earlier than previously thought.
It's interesting. The evidence that lab leak theory is more than a theory keeps coming in. I wonder if there'll be any accountability for anybody involved.
This obviously overlaps substantially, is similar to reporting that Vanity Fair ProPublica has done on those diplomatic cables from Wuhan to the Chinese government that have been that were kind of decoded by some Chinese language experts for ProPublica that said they really look like they're hinting at something having gone wrong. Many of the problems Marco Rubio just outlined there, the understaffing, the unsafe, the lack of like proper the correct procedures for washing down, for having the facility built with materials that are correct for cleaning everything, warning the government that they were so the government had pressured them to discover, to find, to innovate, and then them warning the government that some things might have not been so great. And of course, we've heard, firsthand accounts from people who the laboratory would send into bat caves to collect the samples, not wearing gloves, masks, the bats biting them as they're picking them off the cave walls, sound highly, highly unsanitary, highly dangerous. So again, it's all circumstantial, but also the wet market theory has lost. It had picked up steam recently because the people read that study, and the New York Times and others defiantly declared, we found the raccoon dog. Look how much raccoon dog genetic material is shared with this swab that has COVID as well. Now we know that was really a misread, that substantially the swabs do not overlap at all with that animal, and that was really a red herring on the part of people who did not read the study closely enough.
Yeah, it is really interesting how just the words wet market have fallen out of the public discourse. We do get these little blips and bloops like the raccoon dog story that do seem to offer some alternative narrative to the lab leak theory. But it does really seem, since some of these government agencies a few months ago acknowledged that it was more likely than not that lab leak theory was the real origin of COVID-19, that doesn't really even seem to be that controversial anymore. And so then I do wonder, what is the next step? I mean, these corroborating bits of evidence certainly are useful, like this report that Marco Rubio has surfaced now. And, nobody can doubt the contributions of that to our better understanding of what happened. But I am also really interested, especially with so many Republicans, I think, rightly trying to raise attention, bring attention to the corruption and weaponization of various other arms of government, whether or not we're going to see some real substantive policy reforms and perhaps even some legal accountability for the people who are involved in allowing this to spread, and more importantly, who are involved in the cover-up.
Well, reportedly, the National Institutes of Health have taken the bare minimum first step, finally, of delisting the Wuhan lab, in addition to a bunch of Russian labs, which I assume is some Ukraine kind of thing. But we have it on screen here. Rand Paul saying it's about damn time. Yes, it is. This is all according to the White Coat Waste Project, which has been a critic of funding on animals that Fauci funded. We've had some guests from them on the show much earlier. Ryan Grimm and I had them on before. So they're saying the NIH is no longer going to do business with the Wuhan lab, which is duh, please
Yeah.
no. Please stop greenlighting these things.
It's just not that serious.
I don't want to see what we're manipulating viruses in unsafe lab conditions in China anymore. No more, please.
Yeah, just from an optics perspective, whatever they can do at the Wuhan lab, they can certainly set up somewhere else in the world with the appropriate safety precautions.
Yeah. How about the moon? How about Mars? How about the space station? Okay, and then when people start turning into the thing, it just stays on the space station.
There's another really interesting point that was raised actually recently by RFK Jr. He was talking about it in the context of environmental law and how some of his concerns about nuclear power involve the fact that there's no insurance company that is willing to extend a policy to them. There's like this basic understanding that the product is so potentially dangerous and that the dangers would create such a significantly high cost burden if they did have to pay that no company in their right mind would willingly insure it. And that speaks to something that happens in a lot of pollution cases, a lot of climate change cases, is that we're dealing with mass externalities where there's no liability for nuclear power. If there were liability, they wouldn't be able to set up business in the first place because they can't get insurance. They have limited liability in those kind of contexts, and that enables companies to discharge their waste into the public water supply. People get mercury poisoning. There's millions and millions and billions of dollars of health effects that are downstream that never get accounted for. And that's why we have so many of the problems that we do, because the markets are inefficient. We can pray for an efficient market, but the reality that they are inefficient because of government subsidies, because of externalized costs, pollution, and the like. And in this context, it really does seem like the limited liability for these pharmaceutical companies, whether it's the development of the vaccine or the insulation that places like these government institutions have against any real legal recourse, are part of why we ended up with a catastrophe as big as the one we have, and also why there seems to be a relative disinterest in actually getting to the bottom of what happened here.
Yeah, like you said, artificially limiting liability is not a free market move.
Yeah.
In a free market, people are supposed to pay the cost, the consequences if they cause harm, or you're supposed to be able to take them to court and sue them and work it out in civil procedure, that kind of thing, the common law. But it is when government artificially limits liability, that is actually an intervention.
Yes.
So that's not something I'm going to defend.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
And as you point out, very well could have created the conditions where there's unsafe. I mean, this happens in oil drilling. Sometimes they hold Deepwater Horizon.
Absolutely.
Why are they drilling there? Well, there's a liability cap. It's so dangerous. Like you said, no one would insure it because it's so dangerous. But they actually had their liability artificially capped.
Yes.
Which to destroy. You might not support them drilling elsewhere, but they could. Drilling in the shallow waters off the coast of California still has, you might argue, has environmental harms that you don't want to happen, but is safer than drilling in the middle of the Gulf of Mexico, a billion feet below. I'm using really precise numbers today, below the surface. Yeah. That is inherently dangerous. And they should bear that cost. They'd have to pay, but they had their liability artificially capped. So drill there.
Yeah. East Palestine is another example of one of these situations where if railroad companies aren't forced to internalize the cost, including the long-term health costs of people who are going to be suffering from the fallout of those kind of disasters, they'll never implement safety procedures that could prevent them happening in the first place. So, yeah.
More Rising right after this.